Welcome back. I just talked about the crucifixion and talking about Jesus' death on the cross. The first question that comes up, and it seems to be a question of great controversy, is whether Jesus actually did die. And let the facts speak for themselves. You know, you look through the Gospels, and the Gospel writers make a point to demonstrate that the ones who would have been able to determine if Jesus was dead are there to make that determination. The centurion, who was basically part of the death patrol, he was the first one, and he looked at and determined that Jesus was dead, didn't need to break his legs. And the confirmation of the death was the fact that when he stuck the spear into his side and water and blood came out of the wound that was there, confirmed that the pericardium had been full of fluid. All of this is part of that post-mortem examination that would have, if we were talking about doing an autopsy today, that's one of the things that they would have found. The heart had stopped. So people have argued with this point and said, no, he was in a coma, or he was swooned, or he was, faking it. But that just doesn't bear up underneath the facts and the evidence. First off, remember, he's still nailed to the cross. Spear going into his side, if there would have been any life in there, the body would have reacted to that weapon going in and making that opening. It's not this tiny little orthopedic type scope opening, but we're talking about a spear going in there, and so the wound would have been probably maybe as big as your hand. You could fit your hand into it. In fact, in one of the gospel accounts, it says that when Thomas didn't believe it was Jesus, Jesus says, "Come here and stick your hand into the wound." And so the wound in his side was big enough that he could put his hand in. So that being said here, that's the first part. Then they had to extract the nails from his hands and his feet. Remember, they would have had to put some kind of a bar or something like that to be able to pull those nails out. And imagine the agony of the nails going in. Think about it if you were still alive and the agony of having to pull those nails out. Jesus didn't move, didn't make a sound, didn't make any kind of alarm with that. He was gone. He was dead. Then take the fact that the two men carried him to the tomb, which was close at hand, and they hauled him in and they laid him on a slab and wrapped him as they would in a mummification type of a shroud and covering, so that they could prepare his body for burial, putting the spices and all of those things. Imagine here you got open wounds, especially the scourging that he took, and you're putting these spices into those open wounds. Think about it. The next time you have a cut, go in and pour a couple of ounces of salt on your cut. In fact, get your finger really good and wet, and then stick it in some salt water, and then tell me that you would have not reacted or pulled back with just the simpleness of salt. Imagine the different spices they used for burial. That would have been there: myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, aloes, acacia. These things would have just, to a person who was in agony or had open wounds, bleeding wounds like that, it would have set you right off. There would have been no faking. He put in the tomb, and then he's left there, and he was in the tomb for 3 full days, and no stirring. The rock that was rolled in front of the tomb was so big that it could not be moved away by one single person. So again, Jesus couldn't have slipped away in the night because he couldn't have rolled the stone away. It was blocking the opening to the tomb. The accounts and the gospel accounts of talking about, one of the gospels say that the opening of the tomb was such that it so frightened the guards that they felt like dead men, in such that they weren't going to move, they weren't going to let anybody know that they were still alive, that maybe they were asleep or whatever the case may be, but they didn't want anybody to stir them or make anything about it. So these are just some simple facts that are there that would demonstrate the fact that, yeah, Jesus did die, and Jesus did resurrect from the dead. Now, that's another part of this whole thing, and I'm going to just take a minute to kind of go into some very important reasons, very simple reasons, why I know that Jesus resurrected from the dead. His body wasn't hidden away. His disciples didn't steal it away. And one of the very simple facts is, what would religious people do with the body of somebody they deemed as a holy man? Well, we'd have the church of the holy body of Christ. We would have they would have worshipped it, and they would have held on to it. It is the same reason why when Moses dies in the Old Testament, that God is the one that actually takes Moses and buries him. And he buries him in a place that nobody knows where it's at, because the children of Israel lauded him as such an important and powerful prophet that they would have stayed there and they would have enshrined it, and they would have bowed at this little place where Moses' body was, because they revered him as being a holy man. Well, think about that in the likeness of Jesus and the people that knew him. We know that there was at least 120 that were dead solid followers. I mean, they weren't going to budge on anything. They were the ones in the upper room. There was at least 500 people that he showed himself to after the resurrection. So there was some areas of influence there. And imagine what would have happened if they would have stolen away the body of Jesus. Well, it would have been somewhere in the Middle East there, and we would have been able to go by and look at his bones. It would have been revered as something very holy and very sacred. Think about it in the likeness of some of the prophets who've gone before, like Muhammad and some of those places. Their tombs are revered as something, as a holy spot, a holy place. So there is no place like that, because Jesus isn't left in a grave somewhere. He didn't stay in the grave. He rose from the dead. He rose, and he is alive. And he was witnessed to by not just 2 or 3 people. It wasn't just Simon Peter and a couple of the others. It wasn't some women who may have been emotional or influenced, like some people might want to think. He was witnessed to be alive by at least 500 people after he resurrected from the dead. Tomb was empty. Grave clothes were empty. They saw him. He ministered to them. He did incredible things for 40 days following his resurrection. And so I just give you that to understand that he did die on the cross. He was completely dead. He wasn't faking it. There was no way he could fake it. If we just stop and examine the evidence, if we just use the practical common sense that God gave us, we can find out that those things that are written there weren't trying to shape us or to try to convince us, but they really truly give us an example and understanding that Jesus actually did die. Thank you.